if those men who are put in that office are to bring the word of Christ to God's people. They have to be men who know their scriptures and who know what it means to be men of prayer. Who know what it means to wrestle in prayer. Who know what it means to live lives that are in the presence of God, the sanctuary of prayer. Otherwise, you can't do your work. They must be, as far as personal godliness is concerned, men of wisdom. I don't have to say much about that. The problems that you men have in the office are so many and so great that it takes extraordinary wisdom to be able to perform the duties of your office. And you must labor always in the consciousness of your dependence upon Christ. That you can't do the work, that you can't make the word effective, that Christ will be present through you only when you work in the consciousness that you are only a tool, an instrument in the hands of Christ, who is the King and prophet and priest in his church. Those are the qualifications for personal godliness. The passage goes on to discuss certain qualifications that have to do with the relationship between the deacon and his family. He must have his family in subjection, says the apostle. That's also characteristic of the elders, by the way. Striking that this qualification is also necessary for the deacons. He must rule his children and his own house well. He must be able to show in his family the ability to exercise authority, because he has a position of authority in the church. Not the authority of a tyrant, but the authority that he exercises in the name of Christ. If he can't do it in his church, in his family, he can't do it in the church. He must be a man, therefore, who in his own family instructs his family in good, solid Christian stewardship and the principles of Christian stewardship, and who instructs his family in works of mercy. If he doesn't even know how to instruct his family how to be merciful, if he doesn't even know how in his own family to be a good steward over the things which God has given to him, he cannot possibly function as a deacon in the Church of Christ, because this is what he's going to have to explain to others. There are also, in the third place, certain qualifications listed for the wives of deacons. And it is important that the deacons' wives be grave, not slanderers, sober, faithful in all things, because they may have to assist their deacon husbands in his work. And so the gist of it is that a deacon's family must also be a family which is personally given to charity. And only such a man is fit for the office of deacon. Finally, the third class is his relationship to others. He must have a good reputation, the text says. He must not be given to wine, to much wine. You may drink a little glassful once in a while. He must not be double-tongued. That is, he must be a man of his word. He must be a man of integrity, a man of honesty, so that you can rely completely upon his word, and you never need to doubt that what he says, he means. He keeps his word. He must not be himself covetous, coveting the things of this present time, coveting houses and lands and earthly possessions. He must not be that kind of a man. Or miserly, but he must himself be a man of generosity, a man who knows that earthly possessions in themselves mean nothing, but the riches of the kingdom of heaven are all the riches that count. Those are the qualifications, briefly, of 1 Timothy 3, and with that, I have finished my piece. Any questions about, any questions about this? About anything I've said tonight? Yes, John.
Is it proper to compare the work of the deacons as they stand today as the two offices of priest and prophet, to compare that to the priest in the Old Testament? My point is that the priests in the Old Testament were very much concerned with the business of running the temple. And does that relate to deacons being concerned with the business of the church today?
I've often wondered about that myself, John, and in fact there was a time when I took that position. I took the position at one time that just as the priests and Levites in the Old Testament took care of all the financial aspects of the work of the temple, so must the deacons do so in the new dispensation. But I changed my mind on that point, and I changed my mind on it because as I read and reread the New Testament on this subject, and as I read what our form for ordination says, and what our church order says, and what all men who have to do with a study of the office of deacon said, I came to the conclusion that after all it's biblical that the work of the deacons, as far as their office is concerned, is limited to the care of the Lord. But I did once hold that same position which you described, but I changed my mind. Anyone else?
I think that in as much as what you've said, when you hear the preaching today around about thought is known as the social gospel, it would seem that that's exactly the fundamental error of it, that they really don't address the greatest need, and that's God himself being our greatest need. And in that sense of the word, the church in many areas falls in step with the world. And that is really the sin of the social gospel, that they can only, or do they only address the physical part of it.
It's absolutely correct. There's a lot of misunderstanding on that question too, by the way, even among us. Let me tell you a little story. I remember one time a few years ago I was at a young people's retreat or convention, I don't remember what it was, but I was with a group of young people and in a group discussion. We're probably about, as I recall, 10 or 15 of us together, and these young people were arguing that we were remiss in our calling because we were not going down into the ghetto and helping the poor. And there were all kinds of other organizations and institutions doing this, and we ought to be doing this too. Churches were doing it. Everybody was helping the poor. Here we sat in our ivory towers, and we didn't pay any attention to the poor. And that was
sinful on our part. We were remiss in our duty. So I said to those young people, well, look, I don't have any objections if you want to get a truckload of groceries and go to Baxter Street downtown and distribute groceries to the poor. Go ahead. That's not sinful. But there's one thing you got to do. You're going to be faithful to your Lord. And that is, every time you drop off a bag of groceries at a home, you say to those people, I'm coming here in the name of Christ. And I'm bringing these to you in the name of Christ, who has shown mercy to me, a poor sinner. And I want to display to you that mercy which Christ has shown to me. And that mercy will be yours when you repent of your sin and of your evil way and walk in the ways of the Lord. If you tell them that, you may go, you may bring as many groceries to Baxter Street and Beamer Street and 60th Street as you want, and the Lord will look with favor upon that. But don't just bring groceries. That doesn't mean he'll obey. It's got to come with the Word of God. Well, that was a different story, of course. They didn't quite know whether they were up to that.
I remember years ago when I was very young, my brothers and I used to get into quite heated arguments with my father. He was trying to show us that all that is not out of faith is sin. Then we used to cite examples of the worldly philanthropy that how could that possibly be sin? And of course that was exactly the point that he was trying to make, as you made tonight. But I had to become so old before I began to understand that a little bit. See?
Yeah, but at least you understand it.
A little bit. A little bit.
Yeah, that's true, though. Anyone else? Yes, Bill?
Based on Catechism and question and answer 103 there, that contributing to the relief of the poor is connected with worship. Would you say then that we should have benevolent fund collections with both worship services?
Well, I think that's a matter of discretion. I personally would like that. I personally would like benevolent fund collections in every service. To me, you see, Phil, most of our churches, if not all of our churches, have offertory now. That is, years ago, you know, when I was a child and when I was first in the ministry, we sang a song while the collection was being taken. But now they've all shifted to offertory. I think that's good. I'm in favor of that because the offertory is also part of the worship. I worship when I give my gifts. But I don't do so much worshiping when I give my money for the general fund. I owe that. It's what it costs to run the church. I don't worship so much. I think in a way even that can be construed as worship in a general sense of the word, but I don't worship so much when I give money to a collection that is going to go to the standard bearer. But I do worship when I give my gifts to the poor, because that's a direct expression on my part of the mercy that I have experienced as a lost and worthless sinner who is saved by the grace of Christ. You see? And that's why I wouldn't want to be legalistic about it, and I wouldn't want to say you've got to have a benevolent collection in every service. But I find it for myself personally, from the viewpoint of my own experience, to make that part of the service an act of worship for the benevolent fund more than for any other collection. Somebody, Bruce.
The discussion about deacons should arouse the congregation to love and mercy to the congregation, to warn the congregation about covetousness. first of all, finding out if there's need, and secondly, to instruct them on giving and on principles of Scripture.
Apparently, the Reformed churches in the past did not consider that to be wrong. Because, as I mentioned, several of the synods of the Reformed churches in the Netherlands passed ordinances that the deacons ought to visit all the members of the congregation every time before the Lord's Supper, even 4 times a year, in order to remind the congregation of these things, and even in order to do this for the purpose of collecting alms. They would sometimes collect the alms right on what you call family visitation. I don't like that. I think the Scriptures point to making this an act of worship in the Lord's house. But the Reformed churches have never had any objection against that.
Where's the ban? Why isn't it being done?
I don't know. I can't say that it's ever been done in the Reformed churches in the last century. I don't know about that. I'm not sure. An interesting question. Anyone else? Okay, then next time, the Lord willing, we're going to get at the questions. We'll discuss, first of all, questions concerning the relation of the deacons to the congregation and the church. And maybe that will come up again in connection with the questions of the relation between the deacons and the congregation. So you men can think about that question Bruce brought up. Think about that. All right, who has a number with which we can close? Anyone, John?
204.
204, okay. May I ask you to close, Phil, when after we've sung 204? Let's sing the 4 stanzas, I guess.